to the Empowered Intuitive Academy podcast. I am one of your hosts, Taylor Henderson, also known as the Kynoch Witch. And with me is my beautiful co-host, Petra Costa at When Magic Awakes. And today we are chatting about witchcraft in pop culture. What's wrong with this picture? And to be honest, a lot. There is a lot wrong with this picture, and we're going to pick it apart a little bit with some of the different well-known examples from pop culture that we can see today and that have influenced or inspired these movements of spirituality, particularly with witchcraft. So, Petra, you started off this process of picking this apart by looking into what a witch actually is, definition wise.
Yeah, it seems like the first question to ask. So, and this is from doing a quick Google search that comes up.
As always.
As always. Well, the thing is, this is the first place most people go.
That's
and
right.
They read this and then they don't go much further because they've gotten their answer, supposedly. Yeah. So a witch is a person who practices witchcraft, magic, or potions. They are often portrayed as wearing pointed hats, black cloaks, and flying on broomsticks. Pointed hats.
Pointed hat.
Yeah. It's like traditionally, the word witch was used as an accusation, and witches were accused of bewitching people or casting spells to control them. Okay, fair enough. That's pretty standard. But he goes on to tell us that a witch is, especially a woman, is credited as having unusually maligned supernatural powers. Now, I like that, unusually malign, like as if a woman would just normally have malign supernatural powers.
But these are malignant beings walking around.
These are unusually malign. Not that you can just put past as just being the standard woman.
So to the times of like where the definition of witch comes from. Hey, like you can already smell the Puritan in the air.
Yeah, exactly. A witch is also someone who can do harm simply by wanting to do harm, by using the powers intrinsic to her body. I'm going to pause there for a second to let you take that in. Intrinsic to her body, or by calling on a larger, darker power in the cosmos. So, one, I get offended by this, by the concept that anything that is intrinsic to my body is offensive. That really arcs me up right from the start. I really don't care much about the larger, darker powers in the cosmos, even though it is obviously feeding into ridiculous stereotypes. I take absolute umbrage at the use of the word power intrinsic to her body, like that's somehow a bad thing.
So there's always been that licentiousness added to what the witch is, particularly when we're looking at a witch from the historical point of view of, say, Christianity or Puritan beliefs, when we're looking at, say, the burning times and stuff. And the larger, darker force is almost always referring to the devil, because to make a pact with the devil during a witch's Sabbath, which is, usually on a full moon or whatever, where you would all get sky-clad, aka naked, and form pacts with the devil using our bodies, aka have sex with the devil. And unpacking that a little bit, there is such thing as satanic witches and Luciferian practitioners, but not every witch, and it's definitely not a prerequisite that you have to lie with the devil to get some out there supernatural power. Look, I've not been with the devil. I am a practicing witch. I can't say he's shown up here for a good time. So I don't know if he's a good lay or not, but it sounds like he is from a boy.
Well, he gets around. That we do know.
That promiscuous horn thing So but it's funny that is a stereotype that's still held up today for witches, that comes up in a Google search.
It is, but you know me, I looked a bit further because I feel like I'm the kind of person that doesn't take the first Google search. So I went to the first semi-legitimate source to give me a definition of what witchcraft is. So just so we all know, from a legitimate source, witchcraft is a perceived facility to summon evil spirits and demons to do harm to others. And it was linked to religion to the extent that the medieval church had powers to punish those who dabbled in magic and sorcery. Its priests were able to exorcise those who had become possessed by the malign spirits. So not only have we got there that what witchcraft is, it's definitely malign. You've been possessed by something, but it's okay. You are safe because the church and its priests will be able to come along and exorcise these malign spirits from your body. Now, this reputable source that I'm quoting here is actually coming from the UK Parliament's definitions on witchcraft.
What? What?
I'm serious. And if I scan down, and this is, anyone can go look it up. If I scan down, it then goes on to talk about evil spirits and all of the witchcraft acts that happened, have been enforced and then revoked, and all the way through their law around witches. Now, the one thing we have to say here in this podcast, we are not going to talk about the history of witchcraft.
No, we'll be here forever if we dive down that rabbit hole. But
we're not going to go there.
It's coming. An episode is coming.
It has to be. So we're not going to go there. But needless to say, that's what I got when I looked it up. So reputable source, basically malign spirits, summoning evil and demons to do harm. Always to do harm. There's not one reference here that a witch is doing anything but harm.
Excellent. I'm glad that I now am well informed on what a witch actually is, and that I need to go and take a good hard look at myself in the mirror and reestablish what's wrong. What am I doing wrong? Like, it sounds like, one, I need to get around in black robes and just cause chaos everywhere I go with my body. So maybe tits out. And two, I need to hit the devil up. Like, is he on Tinder? Because like, I want my telekinesis and I want my power to glamour, and I just want it all. Like, where is he? Where's he at?
That's a great point. So why do you think that you would have the power of telekinesis or pyrokinesis or all of the kinesises? Because where would you get that from?
Well, isn't that what happens according to American Horror Story Coven? You become a witch and all of a sudden you're killing people, with the power of your hoo-ha. Like, isn't one of the Zoe the character in America? And sorry, disclaimer for spoilers. If you haven't watched these if you haven't watched these shows or read these publications or anything that we refer to,
well, you should have. That's all I'm going to say. They've been around for years. Get onto it.
Spoilers alert. Spoilers alert. Sound like a bloody Dalek. But yeah, she's like has sex with her boyfriend one of the very first episodes and kills him, like drains the life out of him. Now, if that's not using your body for,
the
intrinsic powers, I don't know what is it. Yeah. So, but I watched American Horror Story Coven and I felt cheated because I did not have all of the kinesises at my disposal. So,
and I find that really interesting that it's almost like whoever was writing American Horror Story Coven, great series, by the way. Go and watch it. It's one of my favorite ones in the whole series.
Mine too.
So I have no problem with that. This is where I've got to clarify. My outrage at this is not about actually watching it. So that some people call me a hypocrite because I still watch these things and enjoy it.
So do I. Well, I love witchy fantasy shows and books and things. Like,
love it.
Love it.
This is where I have a problem, right? This is where I start going into the, goodness, did you need to? Make them have all these powers. Make them have, telekinesis, pyrokinesis, all of them, transmutation, every single one of them. Fine, because it's fiction. It's a story. We want to enjoy it. The more fantastical it is, the better. But this is where I have a very big problem. We then wrap that up with the history of it. We then say these are Wiccan witches that are doing. These are the rules around it, and they come back from the burning times, and we apply a human history to where they've gotten to the genesis of those witches, and that's where I have a real problem.
Because in Coven, they do tie the Coven back to the Salem and the burning times, which is a popular trend, in anything to do with witches, in pop culture and TV and movies and stuff. It's always tied to that time, like there's a generational thing happening.
Yeah. And that's what I find is really difficult, because depending on what your belief system is, witchcraft, whether it be, and it seems that people only talk about Wiccan witchcraft, which has been around for what, since the 1950s, 60s,
60s,
sometime.
yeah, yeah.
People think it's been around for forever, and it's actually the religion that was pre-Christian. And again, that's history, so we're not going to go there. But it's this taking this, what people view as a religion, that is their religious practice, and bastardizing it into this mix of Stephen King's Firestarter with a little bit of this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
We wouldn't do that to any other religion.
No, no.
No, we wouldn't do that. And like, we may go off and have, these crazy people out in the woods that, look like a certain kind of religion. They're, the male dominated females, and something spooky goes on in the background. But we will not be specific about what's going on there. We're just talking about a stereotype. And this is
That's
where,
a witch's Sabbath, Petra.
yeah,
Didn't know that. Didn't you know
yes,
that? It says it like I saw it on the movie. That's what it is. Like,
exactly. And
yeah.
this is where I feel like if they're not going to give us a bit of a disclaimer, like, we know it's fantasy, right? We know that. Why do we need to try to bring those elements in history in there, so that people who aren't going to be bothered to investigate and to look into it,
I
that
think a really good example for a take on another religion in history in American Horror Story Coven is the inaccuracy when it comes to depicting Papa Legba and Marie
exactly.
Laveau. So I love that they included her as a historical character in the series. She's actually probably my favorite character in the whole series, apart from Queenie. Because who wouldn't love to voodoo doll themselves and walk around using her body, causing maleficarum? But yeah, and I love that they brought her in, but Papa Legba is so wrong in his image. He looks more like Baron Samedi, which anyone who is familiar with Houdon Voodoo
Exactly.
practices. Papa Legba is of the Crossroads, and he looks more like an old man with a straw hat and a pipe. And he usually has the red vest, the straw pants. He's kind of like a hillbilly looking old farmer, right? He's been out in the cotton fields and whatnot. And I don't mean that in a racist sort of connotation, but that was the time where he came from, and he was venerated. We have the fusion of Christianity and African voodoo practices in there. So he was not who was depicted. Baron Samedi was the one who was depicted, which is the lower of the underworld and the graveyard and whatnot. And he's the one that wears the hat with the skulls and has the Grim Reaper looking face and everything, and making the pact with Marie Laveau. And then again, making the pact with Marie Laveau, a darker spirit or a darker presence bestowing the gifts and the powers upon her. But as in the show, there's a sacrifice to that. She had to sacrifice her child to get those powers, and that is also a common theme that we see within these pop cultures and things, like this really grotesque form of magic and sacrifice, which derives from that original image of what a witch does. I watched a movie recently called The Witch, funnily enough, and it really is like a Puritan nightmare come to life, because it's about this family that they've been kicked out of their village, and they're devoutly religious and they're praying to God, and they decide to settle on the outskirts, like right next to the forest edge. And over time they get weird odd things happening, like dead livestock, crops that are failing, things like that, health deteriorating. And there's this one scene where the girl is playing peekaboo with her baby brother, and peekaboo, and she looks down and the baby's disappeared. He was lying on the ground and he's no longer there. And they look and they look, and in the next scene you've got the witch of the woods, right, making a poultice out of these baby bits. And sorry, that to me that's very triggering. So because infanticide is just horrendous. But like that in that depiction, that's really the image that's being portrayed. That grotesque stuff goes on.
The thing that struck me too there is that it's often associated in these movies and portrayed in these movies that when you move closer to the forest, you're going to where the witches are. You're going that, don't go into the woods today because there might be something in there. Whereas, and it's moving away for civilization, where civilization is where you're good and you're protected, and it's all this kind of stuff. Which even in of itself, we're not talking about that here, but goodness gracious, can we just get away from this kind of things? That how can a forest be bad?
It's a metaphor, isn't it? It's a metaphor for going against the tide, for being on the fringes, for straying outside of the society, right?
And that's where a lot of this comes from. And then if we look back, obviously witches existed, and I'm ignoring the supernatural side of it. I'm just ignoring that for a second. And when we've got, the old women in the woods, and they did live in the woods because that's where they foraged. That's where they got their ingredients. That's where they hunted their, what they needed to live and survive. But let's put this in perspective. Back then, most people lived in the woods.
Yeah,
like it's not as if there was all of these like raging metropolises everywhere. But no, the older woman who did that, because heaven forbid she should have some wisdom. Heaven forbid she should actually know what she's talking about.
But in this pop culture, portrayals, she's demonized as the old hag who is going to eat children like Hansel and Gretel, luring them in with candies and then going to boil them for stew or whatever. And like, it's really preying on our worst fears as society. And when they did come up with that original demonization of the witch back way when, that was really the focus, to bring on all of the fears. And so like the witch in that time and now in fantasy is the embodiment of societal fear, of straying away from the norms, of preying on our most vulnerable and weak, taking control away from us, challenging our faith per se with their licentiousness in their bodies. Because temptation, thou shalt not have temptation. And another cultural example of that whole forest dwelling witch is the Blair Witch.
I haven't watched that.
Haven't you watched it?
I'm too scared to watch it.
Petra. Honestly, horror movie wise, there's a lot of build up for not a lot. In my opinion, I found it a bit lacking, but the mythology, the whole fictional mythology of the Blair Witch has really just blown up. Like there's video games and stuff about her now. Like, I played a video game recently on Xbox about the Blair Witch, and it was good. It was freaky. But I mean, the way she's represented, I would say that's more of a demonic force than what a witch is. Like in itself, that's an inaccuracy in my opinion. And I think also that really comes to play in The Conjuring, because we have a similar sort of demonic witch presence which haunts the Perrin family. And in life she does the same thing. She sacrifices a child in love for Satan, but then hangs herself outside. So it was like the ultimate sin against God, because but then becomes like this demonic entity. So I mean, like,
I'm a fantasy writer, right? So I write in the fantasy realm. I have No problem with using an archetype that's already out there. Love it, no problem. I have no problem working with mythology and folklore and all of that traditional stuff that we have. There are witches in books going back, like you said, Hansel and Gretel. There's always a witch. She's always trying to eat a child. She's trying to do something like that. She's living in the forest. No problem. No problem, because in my mind I categorize that as similar to being a troll or an ogre or whatever it is. This mythical being that finds its way through these fantasy realms. Have no issue with that. Where I have issue in terms of pop culture is we're representing it with a historical reference, and we're happy to continually portray women in a horrendous light, that our bodies are somehow a tool only for evil. We very really rarely talk about what a good witch can do unless it's in such a patronizing way, like Glenda the Good Witch.
Yes.
Like, oh,
Yeah.
let me come in
Yeah.
literally in a bubble of light. Let me just float in on a bubble of
Let me
light.
twinkle my nose and have all the dishes done and dinner cooked and, TV on for you as soon as you walk through the door, darling. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, that really irks my feminist heart.
That's the
I'm not
thing.
gonna lie, feminist here, but yeah. And I also think the good witch, bad witch scenario really plays into like 90s TV shows and things like Charmed, right? Charmed is a
What was that?
massive
That was
one.
even when was Bewitched? That was 60s, surely.
Yeah, yeah,
That was yeah.
yeah.
Go.
So Charmed, which is like the 90s, is still sort of perpetuating the good witch narrative, and it really
They've got the light worker. What's his name? He comes
Leo,
down.
Leo.
Yeah,
They've got the
as
light
if,
worker. Yeah,
which is almost an angel, really.
yeah, yeah.
It is almost an
Which,
angelic force.
funnily enough, let's rabbit hole this for a minute. When you go
Yep.
down the path of Wicca, and this is going to be a really unpopular opinion, soz not soz, but I sometimes feel like when you look at Wicca and the whole harm ye none, and no personal gain and all that sort of thing, which is highly pushed in the show, and that
Oh yeah.
there's real undertones of that higher esoteric occult mindset, and it's borderline sort of Christian beliefs as well when you
Yep.
really unpack it. So
Yep.
it's kind of funny that
Well, it's
Leo.
not borderline, Tay. It's
No,
not
it's in
borderline.
there. I'm trying to be polite, but really,
No,
here
don't
we
be
go.
polite, because I was just watching an episode just the other day because my
Yeah,
daughter's rewatching it.
yeah.
And when, what's his name, Leo comes down, and it's
Leo,
all like,
the Jinn angel.
and he comes down, and I went, dudes, really? Like, really? So
Yeah,
very similar to Supernatural with Castiel.
Castiel. Yeah.
Yeah, like, okay.
Even
Where
in
where
that, even in Supernatural, witches are like, can you
where
trust
did you think the
them?
power was
Not
going to come
trust
from?
them. Yeah, like
I
Rowena.
remember I remember Dean saying that. Where did you think the power was going to come from?
Yeah,
Well, there's more powers out there. So as this goes on, this is a real tangent, but it's all under the premise that the only power that can be generated is from a higher
a
being,
higher being.
whether it be God or a godlike
Yeah,
figure,
yeah,
or it's the counterpoint to that, which is the devil or a demon-like figure. But that's
yeah.
the only place that any real substantial path-altering power can come from.
And it can
So
be taken away at any time.
anytime, and that's just where it sort of like gets a little bit, please. I just feel like just doing a really condescending please.
Yeah,
What
yeah,
are you thinking? And the reason I got issue with this, Tay, is we see it, the craft movies just about to be re-released, Wicca, right? All Wicca
yeah,
witchcraft that it's
yeah,
talking about. Okay, and as we've said, Wicca came into effect around about 50s, 60s, 1950,
yeah, yeah.
1960.
Gerald
Then there was,
Gardner
yeah,
decided he was going to homogenize like a bunch of earth-based practices that he thought were witchcraft as well as traditional witchcraft and occultism and
Yeah.
form them into the one branch of Wicca, which
Yeah.
is a religion. It's deemed a religion.
Yeah. And the thing I find interesting, and I hadn't only noticed this, and when we were just in this conversation, so this is not written down in my notes anywhere, but you've got Wicca, that's all the semi good
Yes.
magic that's
Yeah.
going on. And then whenever we talk about more of the darker side of the magic where there's sacrifice, usually blood sacrifice involved, it's more heading around your hoodoo voodoo kind of laneways
Yes.
in
Yeah.
its representation.
So
Like
it like goes into the what we would call lower magic. Um,
yeah,
people might liken it to black magic. I personally don't like the terms black or white, but so we'll use lower magic. And really, it's really demonizing and bastardizing earth-based practices or animistic practices or sympathetic magics that we have been using since the dawn of time in favor for superior magic or celestial magic or anything that's sort of light and for your higher good and things. And, you know, really, again, demonizing the whole if it comes from below, if it comes from the earth, if it's, you know, if it's
it's
got
like it's
blood,
the
it
body. It's
is.
like our human body
Hmm.
somehow the thing this is, angers me a little bit. The thing that gives birth to our children is somehow dirty.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? Whereas
Yeah.
our thought processes, our mind, our higher self is enlightened and it's on a path of spiritual awakening. But the body, the thing that actually allows us to breathe, that allows us to live, to
To
that for
have these
some
experiences.
nuances is somehow associated with something, I don't know, lower.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I
So,
think I think we got a lot going on here in terms of where this stupid stereotype in pop culture is coming from, because it's bundling a lot of stuff in together. It's
yeah, it
bundling
is. It
in
is.
patriarchal society, trying to bring women down any way we can in terms of associating them with this. I watched a show. I had to turn it off. I actually got so enraged. I had done this course recently, a wonderful course called Walk of the Witch with a very good friend of mine. And during the course of,
It's great.
yeah, it was great. And when we were doing that, and Taylor really does delve into the history of witchcraft in all of its forms, because
Mm.
let's be frank, this is a very European style witchcraft we're talking
It
about here
is.
that's
It
come through
is.
into Wicca, and there isn't a continent on this earth that doesn't have an earth-based practice and its own witchcraft style practice, right? But when
Correct.
we're
Yeah.
talking about this, it's very European. But I was watching a movie and I didn't even watch it long enough to remember its name, but it was basically Hansel and Gretel, and I think it was called Witch Hunters.
Yeah, I know the one. Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought I'll put this on because, I love that medieval kind of, it looked like it was going to have some fantastic special effects, and I really didn't care if it was a witch hunting, because I'm thinking, oh, it's going to be just this fantastical witch that's really bad, and that's fine, I can live with that. Um, so I go in there and start watching the show, and then there's where it's reenacting the burning times. It's reenacting witch hunts, and this woman is about to be executed for
Yeah.
in public for witchcraft, and in the whole full on pitchfork kind of burn the witch kind of mentality. And then Hansel and Gretel come in all kicking ass and boo 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 doing all their martial arts everywhere, and say, no, this has got to stop. And I went, oh, okay, let's see what this is about. The reason they wanted to stop it was because they then proceeded to look in the woman's mouth and to look over the woman and to say, oh, well, this isn't a witch, because if this was a witch, her teeth would be rotten and she would have sores on the inside of her mouth, because with her enacting with the demons and the negative spirits, she starts to rot from the inside out.
She just put a really good glamour on that day.
I was just
But there's always that theme of it's taking something from you. And if you cross a line, you therefore surrender yourself to like the darkness or something.
Yeah.
Like I watched recently, I rewatched Salem, which was set in the time of the Salem trials, but from the perspective of that the witches were actually the ones causing the trials, and they had to slay 13 innocents in order to consecrate the earth in a
Cool.
grand rite to
Yep.
bring the devil to earth, right?
Yeah.
And
Cool concept.
before, yeah, cool concept. I enjoyed it. I loved it. But there was, and even in that, there was always of you've crossed the line, so now you're gonna have to have this ultimate sacrifice. And you find the protagonist, Mary Sibley, going, trying to undo everything she's done because she's realized that this is not what I wanted. I just wanted revenge on the Puritans who sent my lover away and who made me sacrifice my child and stuff like that. Like, I don't want hell on earth. I just wanted a second chance. But there's always that you've crossed a line, and even the witches who serve the devil, they get punished because he just uses them as playthings. Whereas, like, I think it really brings up the morals, those morals that need to be not crossed when it comes to society and things. But it was a very interesting TV series, and again, depicting the more grotesque sort of imagery and the licentiousness of they use their bodies, and they all, in their premise of magic, they say, magic begins with arousal. And you're right, sex magic is a real thing, but they had to use it for everything, and so much blood. They use so much blood for everything. Like they're and this is something I wonder about in all sorts of like shows where there's magic and things. Like they're just cutting themselves left, right, and center, and I'm like, well, how are you not covered in cuts right now? I get you're a witch, you can probably heal it, but like, come on, like even the finger pricks and things, like,
and even this gets me, and I know it shouldn't because but why always across the palm of the hand, where all of the tendons are
like
that make your hand function? Like, I'm going with the fact that you can heal yourself, but you still need that bloody hand to finish off whatever spell it is.
Finish off your spell, and you
keep away from the tendons, people.
Man, I'm hard enough grabbing things with a paper cut. I hate getting paper cuts; they sting. Like, let alone slashing your whole hand. Like that would hurt. And yet, and in lieu of themselves, they use animals, right?
Yeah. So what do we want here, Tay? We would like, we're happy with a fictional. I'm happy being a fantasy author. I'm happy with a fictionalized version of this troll, ogre, witch. I'm happy with that. What I'm not happy with is being degrading of people's an actual religion, and a religion that is growing at a rate of knots that is beyond. I was looking up, and not in terms of who practices it or doesn't practice it, but recent studies have actually shown that 40% of the population, world population, 40% believe witchcraft is a real thing, that it actually is a real thing. Now, I don't think you would ever have thought that you were going to get a percentage as high as 40.
No.
I think that a lot of you think people are just, they think it's just people being kooks and they're off doing their kooky stuff. But this is terms of they're believing it. Now, as to whether they believe that witchcraft can create an outcome, that wasn't detailed in the
Well, witchcraft in and itself isn't a religion, but it is incorporated in various forms of religion and spiritual practice, and it does have devotional elements. So to the outsider looking in, because suppose you could say that you have nothing else to compare it to, so you would deem it some form of religion, right? But in and itself, within movies, pop culture, and things like that, there's special care to depict the church a certain way, or Islam or Muslim, or however society wants that depicted, it's depicted in that way.
Yep.
With witchcraft in that, and with earth-based religions and beliefs and spirituality, it just seems to be something to poke holes in, and something to make fun
openly mock, openly deride, openly have a delineation between male and female, which where are we, people? Like, are we not beyond that? Like, when are we going to get beyond the point where we're not? Now, I'm not saying I'm not a cuckoo feminist. Not saying that you're a cuckoo one, but I'm not a cuckoo feminist, and I understand that there's definitions. But are we really saying that women would be the only ones able to tap into this kind of magic? Is that like, why is that where
Well,
women are the only?
that's a gender stereotype too that keeps being perpetuated in pop culture because there are men that are witches. I know plenty of men that are witches. And there's also the thing of calling male witches warlocks. And that's actually a derogatory term in the magical community. Like a warlock is someone who has been ousted from the magical community, or, they practice in a way that's really just unsanitary and gnarly. I'd love to have the proper definition here for you, but from my knowledge, it's a derogatory term, and men who practice magic don't like being called warlocks for that reason. And same thing with wizards, whether they identify with it or not. Wizard is also put into that fantastical category to be poked holes in. You approach someone and say, "Oh, I'm a wizard," and they'll go, "Oh, you're a wizard, Harry," or "Oh, where's the ring, Gandalf?" Where's
Exactly.
Frodo at? Like, it's a fantastical being. But there are male witches, and they did burn male witches. It just happened to be that 80% of the witches burned were female and 20% were men. So
Harry Potter brings up a very good point, because I had completely forgotten Harry. What's with the Latin? Like, can someone explain to me why the dead language is the language that everyone is using when they want to commune with the devil, or if they want to enact a spell? Like, seriously?
They use it in lots of stuff.
Lots of stuff.
I mean, supernatural. They use Latin to the wazoo. Like, it's just been deemed the language of magic, Latin. And I don't know if that's because, again, we're coming from like a churchy sort of Christian Catholic like angle.
Yeah.
Latin was the accepted language, and a lot of indigenous languages were wiped out, except, but you had to speak Latin or English. And a lot, like all of our scientific names and things are in Latin, and so it's like the mother language of modern society.
Latin, by the witches using the Latin, we're legitimizing it. Is that what we're trying to do? We're trying to give it some credence, academic credence, by doing that.
Well, I think that the power of an exorcism, right? You always got the Latin exorcisms in these things, and it's always the ultimate like hammer to the witches in whatever TV show, movie you're watching. Someone pulls the Latin out, that's it, they're done.
That's it.
But in magic itself, using foreign language or using native tongue is an enhancer for magic, because you're speaking directly to the forces within your own being and your DNA lineage and stuff. Like, speaking different languages, it does add that energetic oomph, but the Latin is definitely where it's at, guys. And Harry, I think too, it really emphasizes that fantastical sort of witch wizard, like, it's a made up thing, it's a fairy tale. But on the other hand, if we're going to present it in a historical way, we're going to do it so that we're still perpetuating the beliefs that the witches deserved it.
Well, I've probably got to put a disclaimer in my book series, When Magic Awakes. We obviously do have witchcraft in there in different forms of witches. My view on it is basically, in the world that I've created there's access to the source power that is stronger than it had been in the past. And all I've done is take that it represents by each person's personality, which is similar to, like, you get the kitchen witch or the garden or the hedge witch or etc. So someone in my book loves cooking, they're going to be the potion master. If someone likes sewing, they're going to be more like the voodoo-esque kind of binding magic, that kind of thing. So I've gone that way, trying to do a nod at all the different styles of witchcraft out there, but without being disrespectful, I hope, to any of them. So I am reinforcing the concept that it's okay it's okay to make fantasy around witchcraft. That's not that's not an issue. It's not as if it's a no-go zone. It's just, please, can we, if we're talking about it from a Wicca perspective, a pagan perspective, an earth-based practice perspective, a voodoo hoodoo perspective, can we at least be a little bit respectful? Is probably what I'm trying to say. Can we be a little bit respectful, and can we also be aware that people don't go more than one level down on a Google search? They
Yeah.
don't. People
Yeah.
believe the first thing that comes up, and it's reaffirming this witchcraft is evil. That it's such a simple thing.
Yeah.
It's evil and it relates to demons. And that's where I've got to say, pop culture, happy to watch you, happy to enjoy the fantastical things you create, but can you please stop perpetuating these really damaging stereotypes?
Yeah. I think definitely when I'm looking at different forms of fictional works, pop cultures, and things, like, I'm always going to enjoy the fantastical magic. I'm always going to enjoy the fact that Misty Day brought back Zoe's boyfriend with mud. Like, I'm always going to enjoy the story and the narrative behind them, depending on what it's about. But I think having it so close to what people actually thought and still think witches are, and having it in front of you on a screen, it backs the other up. It's not real. The reality of witchcraft is that we do walk among you. No, we're not stealing your children to make poultices. I'm not gonna sacrifice your dog to the devil so that we can have a good night, and so that I can get hijack powers. I don't have a white lighter, although spirit guides are a thing. And I think people, when it comes to magic and witchcraft and that, don't look at shows like Charmed and The Craft and think that that's the real deal.
Yeah, it's not a documentary.
No, it's not a documentary. It's not a documentary.
People,
that's what we're trying to get at.
If David Attenborough is the narrator, it's not.
We have the witch, the femme fatale of the night, who walks with her black cat and robe. She is now courting with the devil. Hopefully, from this interaction, she will gain the powers of telekinesis.
And the witch cackles. Oh, too funny, too funny. So yeah, I suppose that's what we're saying. People, it's not a documentary. Please watch it, enjoy it, love it. We all do. And I feel bad. Didn't even mention Bonnie here from Vampire Diaries. So put her in.
Bonnie from
put Bonbons in there, because she kicked ass.
And her gran.
Yes.
She was like my favorite.
Absolutely. So but it's not a documentary. Please do not allow what you see here to taint your views on what witchcraft is. And please, can we stop with the negative stereotype around women? Like, I think that's an important point. Like, I don't want to harp on that and sound all, oh, here we go again. But come on, right? That's a bit much.
I do have to give pop culture this, though, in some respects, because they are the ones that do the historical research and that accurately to depict what they want to depict when it comes to portraying witchcraft, especially in a modern sense, and relating it back to trials and things. There is a lot of messaging around the fact that, women through this avenue have been marginalized and persecuted unfairly, and unjustly, and that there is a lot of ancestral intergenerational trauma from that, even passed down to women, and to people who might have been descended from those who perished in trials and things, or who were accused.
And that comes from the witch wound, doesn't it?
Yeah, the witch wound. And I think watching these types of things, especially for people who are spiritual or practice, will aggravate witch wounds a lot.
Yeah. Yep, 100%. And that's something that we're going to do in a future podcast anyway.
Absolutely.
We're going to talk, when we're talking about the history of witchcraft, we'll actually talk about the witch wound and go into that in more detail, because it's something that's it's new to my vocabulary, but something that resonates with me, because people don't consider these things triggering, and that's like when you watch these, it's just like, oh, it's a bit of fun. The one thing I will say is that I think with pop culture, the women are empowered, and I like the women that are empowered. I would like us to acknowledge the fact that women can be empowered without the help of the devil. That's all.
Yes.
I would just like it to be something that we don't, to be honest, we don't need that. We don't need the help. We can empower ourselves. And just because a group of women to get together doesn't mean they're a coven. So yeah. That's all I got to say about this, Tay. I think,
no, you're onto it. I think when you approach somebody who identifies as a witch or a pagan or whoever in your everyday walk of life, just remember they are not they're not out to get you. They're not going to throw a curse the minute you turn your back. They're not reading your thoughts. Like, just approach it from a little bit of more of a realistic perspective, in that all we do is work with the energies of our environment, work with the liminal spaces and the liminal beings, and it's not so fantastical. And do not walk up to my market stall and ask me if I'm a good witch or a bad witch, because I will turn around and tell you, fuck around and find out.
100%.
So yeah, I think that's pretty much the ducks of it.
100%. So what are we talking about next, hey?
We are talking about dream interpretations.
Oh my goodness, this is going to be a big one. Two very big dreamers here. And their dreams, and they go in all funny directions.
I've had some really whack ones lately, and I'm desperate to share them.
Yeah, absolutely. If anyone's got any dreams they want to throw our way that they want us to do an interpretation of, please do send that through. But if not, we are just going to psychoanalyze each other, and that will be that'll be hysterical in and of itself.
It will. So as always, remember, curiosity may have killed a few cats, but there is no growth in ignorant bliss.
Never a true word.
We will catch you next week. Bye.
Bye.